Hey everyone, I'm going to do a bit more of a theory-oriented video today, and I wanted to talk about a concept that came up in a comment on another one of my limit hold'em hand reviews on the channel. The comment was basically asking me to elaborate on why does PioSolver raise a lot on flops where it also folds a lot. And it is a very good question that I think I can provide some answer to if we dive into an example today. So what we're going to do in this video is look at two different flop textures, and these are both a hijack raise and a big blind defend situation. One texture is Queen 4-4 flush draw, and the other texture is Ace Queen 10 rainbow. Hopefully you can see that these textures are fairly different from each other. Ace Queen 10 obviously being one that should massively favor the pre-flop raiser. And if we just look at the range versus range equity of their pre-flop, we can see that right away. So range versus range equity, 31.5% for the OOP player, whereas on Queen 4-4, OOP has 40%. So he's just doing better because he has more fours. And if you look in his range, you can see why that is. Look at all these combos of 4x and 4x that the in-position player simply does not have. The in-position player from the hijack only has two combos of ace-4 suited, one combo of fours. So a lot of those high equity hands are coming from the wide defense range that's flopping trips. So ask yourself, how will the strategy for the big blind look different on these two board textures? And now I will show you, but feel free to pause and think about that for a moment before we look at the actual strategy. One thing to note is that in both situations, the preflop raiser is just betting his range advantage, right? We already said the in-position player has he has 68% equity on the ace queen 10 and 60% equity on the queen 4-4. That's a massive equity advantage range versus range. And as a result, he's close to range betting on both boards. This one a little bit less, 92%. This one a little bit more, 99%, basically pure betting. What about after the bet, though? How does the big blind respond? Well, on the ace queen 10, maybe it's no surprise, but the big blind has to fold almost half the time, and he's doing only a little bit of raising. Obviously, he has to be very, very worried that he's behind. The button, the hijack here just has all the cards that interact with the board, and the big blind has very few. So he's playing passively and folding a lot. What about on the queen 4-4? The big blind has more equity. How will he respond? Well, very differently. Now he's doing almost no calling. He's still folding 44% of the time, by the way. He's folding almost as often on the queen 4-4 as he is on the ace queen 10. He has all these garbage hands that really have nothing. But he has something different now. The hands that do continue have much greater equity. And so this is the concept at work. There are several reasons why the big blind can play more aggressively on this board. One is the nut advantage, right? So that means the type of combos that are very, very strong. And here that would basically be the trips. We already said that he has many more of those. We can look in a feature of PioSolver called the Range Explorer, and we can explore this in a little bit more detail. Notice how often the big blind has trips. 48 combos of trips here. That is where his nut advantage is coming from, along with some full houses. So 54 total combos of full house and trips. Whereas when we look at the preflop raiser, he has very, very few combos of full houses and trips, right? So because of his strong nut advantage, the big blind can play very aggressively with the range that is continuing here. The other reason is just because he is folding so much of his range, and this is the concept I've talked about in previous videos. When he's folding so much of his range, the remainder of his range is actually getting very, very strong. So if he doesn't raise enough, he's just missing value with the parts of his range that are now an equity favorite over opponent's range. Look at the equity of his raising range against range versus range here. Now, if we just look at the equity in this node, we see that he has jumped to 58% total equity. And that is with a bunch of weird bluffs thrown into his range, right? I mean, we are bluffing all sorts of combos of random overcards like King Jack, Ace Highs. Those aren't really a bluff. Let's see, where can we find some fun bluffs? 7-6 of spades, but 7-6 of diamonds is maybe a less obvious bluff with the backdoor diamonds. Yeah, I mean, all the flush draw combos obviously have equity. So the big blind here is basically trying to weaken his continue range because his range is so strong that he needs to find more bluffs. And because of that strong nut advantage, he's able to check raise aggressively. Let's now look at the ace-queen-10 board and we'll see a bit of a difference in this situation. Here, the big blind has very few raises. Why? Let's look at the range explorer. Because here, while he has a straight, 15 combos of straight, and 20 combos of two pair, so basically, what is this, about 37 combos of two pair plus. Compare that to the preflop raiser, who has even more combos of all of these, right? Because of his range advantage preflop. And also, as a percentage of his range, he has these at a much, much higher relative frequency. So this is where the big blind has to be very careful. He does not have a range advantage, nor does he have a nut advantage. And we can see that the vast majority of his range is calling, and when he does continue here, his equity is about 45%. So he's doing okay equity-wise. He's competitive with the button here, but because he doesn't have enough nutty hands, he has to be very wary of playing too aggressive of a strategy. And my guess would be, I don't know if this sim has three bets on the flop, but in theory, if he were to check raise this flop, I would believe that, yeah, okay, so this is a 2-bet cap on the flop. Otherwise, we would expect that the button would probably be, or the hijacker would probably be able to 3-bet very aggressively himself facing a raise. So that's just the theory concept in a nutshell. I thought this would be a very easy example to explain the idea behind aggressive versus passive strategies on the flop. And if you compare and contrast this ace-queen-10 rainbow with this queen-4-4 flush draw, and think about all of those 4x combos that the big blind can have that the button, that the hijack can't have in this situation, I think it explains the idea pretty intuitively. So let me know if that makes sense. Let me know what questions you have about this kind of concept, because I know that this is not me going through an entire hand, but me comparing two different textures and thinking about how different your strategy is going to be on those two textures. So again, talk to me on the comments on YouTube, and I will be there to answer any follow-up questions. Thanks very much.